In keeping with connections of the extremely rich and the houses that they live in, the mansions, the palaces, the castles, I wanted to talk about the Medicean villas and these artworks by Giusto Utins. I think I've showed them a couple times in the past, but these are very special. They're kind of like semicircle artworks that show the property. They're like property, the equivalent of Zillow back then or something, but definitely a lot better and fancier and painted by an incredible artist, and probably were very prestigious to own one of these. And again, the Medici villages and villas are something that is so interesting. They're the ones that have the just some of the best places all over Europe in the 1600s. Barely anyone had previewed this book, and so it has a lot of interesting information on it, and I'm still convinced that, where did these properties come from, and who owned them originally, and who built them, how long did it take to build them, because they are architectural awesome structures. They have gardens, they have palaces, they have probably underground, they have waterways, they have plumbing, they have all different kinds of amazing places. And so let's take a look at some of these, because I'll read a little bit about them while we look at them, and we'll see what happens. So this one is Cafaggiolo. This villa is situated to the north of Florence in the Mugello Valley, original age-old home of the Medici family. The property dominated a vast area, protected in the west by a series of hills and surrounded by fields which extended to the Sèvres. The original layout of the villa dates back to the 14th century, when it was a Republican fortress. On becoming Medici property, it was turned into a country residence, and in 1427 the Land Registry Office described Averardo de' Medici's property as a residence functioning as a fortress, with a moat and also a house detached from the aforesaid location with family abode and stables. In 1451, Cosimo the Elder commissioned Michelozzi to transform the ancient manor house into a residential building. So the manor house, I wonder what it was before that, who owned it, etc. Interesting. Moving on, this one is called Trebbio. Situated on a hill not far from Cafaggiolo, the Via of Trebbio was one of the first properties owned by that most ancient branch of the Medici family, who made their first land investment in the area of Mugello. In 1451, Cosimo the Elder entrusted Michelozzi, again then working at Cafaggiolo and at Faisal, with the task of fitting up the medieval construction on the estate as a country residence. Michelozzi transformed the 14th century building, all the while keeping its medieval flavor, into a villa of simple structure, square-shaped, with a central courtyard and a guard tower. Like at Careggi and Cafaggiolo, we can find here the covered patrol walkways, supported by shelf-like projections, which skirted the building at the top. Very interesting. At the center of a big farming estate divided up into 28 small holdings. They made up the Medicean fief, covering a large portion of the Mugello. Very interesting. Now we keep going, and this is Castello. The via is situated to the northeast of Florence on the slopes of Monte Morello. It is the oldest via property of the Medici, having first belonged in 1477 to Lorenzo di Pierfrancesco, a family side branch. Here Cosimo I, the first of Medici, was brought up, remaining particularly attached to it. In the extensive building program, he promoted the villa in the surrounding territory, acquired a position of particular importance. In 1537, he called Tribolo back from Bologna to entrust him with the reorganization of the villa and its connected gardens. The artist's major concern was concentrated on suiting the whole complex to the landscape, rather than dealing with the architectonic block. Very interesting. Benedetto Varchi had drawn up a vast iconographic project for the garden. The fountains and statues were to celebrate the glory of the Medici family, Florence, and Tuscany as a whole. Nature cycle was also a theme of the of the gardens. Here we go. Poggio, designed in 1485 by Giuliano de Sangolo for Lorenzo de' Medici, the 15th century villa of Poggio a Caiano constituted a typological example of a princely rural villa for the duration of the Cinquecento. Behind the plans of the villa, there was an intent and a conception which were different to those inspiring the construction of Via Medici at Fiesole, intended as a suburban villa as a place for leisure pursuits. From the start, the determining factor in the formation of the Poggio a Caiano estate was farming, concentrated, however, into an autonomous group set apart from the architectonic entity of the villa. By 1470, Lorenzo de' Medici had already acquired vast expanses of land in the area. Sangallo's plans provided for a noble farmhouse in the immediate vicinity, rationally structured and constituting the central organization of the farming activity. So these guys were claiming all this and making farms out of it. So what is happening? Where do the Medicis come from? I need to dive more into the history of them. If anyone knows, let us know. But there's something. How did they gain all this power? How did they gain the ability to take all these amazing places and basically just do whatever they want with them? It seems seems interesting. Seems very interesting. And so we skipped over Castello. You can kind of look at that. But here we go. This one is the Serravessa. According to local belief, Serravessa, situated near the Tyrrhenian coast in the vicinity of Massa, was originally called La Fabriche, or the factories, because it abounded in foundries, forgeries, and furnaces for the working of iron extracted from the nearby mines of the Apuline Alps. The community of Serravessa throughout the 14th and 15th centuries was at the core of the battles that the republics of Pisa, Genoa, Lucca, and Florence engaged for the possession of Versilia. The community eventually came under the dominion of the Florentine Republic in 1513 on being awarded by Pope Leo X. From that moment, it shared the destiny of Florence in the fall of the Republic in 1529 and came under the absolute rule of the Medici dynasty. Those guys, God, what did they do? La Patria, the property, came under the Medici family around 1532 after it was confiscated from the Strozzis by Alessandro de' Medici. In 1568, Cosimo gave it to his son Ferdinando. At that time, it was a big agricultural estate, producing wheat, oil, and fodder. According to Vasari, Patria was turned into a rest and leisure home by Cardinal Ferdinando. The work he ordered on it has been attributed to Bontalenti, who probably worked here from 1575 to about 1590. The building, then a turreted castle, was transformed in that period into an elegant villa of solid square structure. The protecting roof had a guard tower at its center, the only evidence of its ancient medieval existence, accentuated by a protrusion at the top which was supported by a sequence of closely laid corbels. The medieval existence of all of these. And you can see some star fort kind of things relating over there and around in the area. So again, what happened in the 1400s that led to this change, and why are these people becoming the new Monsanto of the world with their owning farming? And you always got to be sketchy of when a super rich starts to own all the farmland or factories and forgeries. Belvedere con Pitti, Luca Pitti's antique mansion, was purchased in 1549 by Eleanora of Toledo, wife of Cosimo I, with the intention of turning it into a residence fit for court. Thus she engaged Amanati to enlarge the building and Tribolo to landscape the park. At that time, Tribolo had already outlined his plans for the Castello Villa, but these gardens sprang from a still grander project, as he had to create the setting for a royal palace. The artist drew up the plans, which are substantially what we will see today, but he died before being able to start on the big venture. That's a bummer. Pratolino. I did a video of this one. This is the home that has Via dei Pratolino, that has the Medici structure of the giant, the Colossus, that it was a fountain, had all these different fountains, all these different amazing gardens. The project took 15 years. The big park with its gardens was immediately deemed one of the wonders of garden art in Europe. Montaigne, during his journey to Italy in 1580, visited the villa and described it thus. He described it in French, so I'm not going to do that, but definitely take a look at my other video of Pratolino. That place is phenomenal. There's so much cool stuff there, and just again the work of something magnificent. And then what was the medieval purpose? What were the medieval rulers? What medieval royalty lived in these places? What were they doing here? What war did they lose in order to basically have the Medicis end up taking over? And how did the Medicis get that right and that privilege to do that, to be able to do whatever they want on all these top-notch properties all over Italy and Europe? Pretty amazing, pretty astounding. I'm not sure what they did, but I'm sure they are one of those big names that plays a very important part in the incredibly lost history of everything. This is L'Arpeggio. The property is situated to the south of Florence in the neighborhood of Grassina. It first belonged to the Ricasoli family, from whom Francesco de' Medici, son of Cosimo, bought it in 1569 and used it as a summer home for some years. Pretty nice. On becoming Grand Duke, Francesco carried out considerable works of embellishment on the whole complex. Under the direction of Bernardo Bontalento, the works took about 47 months, finishing in January 1585. The lunette therefore illustrates the villa during one of its first moments of glory, when it was used as a summer home for the third Grand Duke of Tuscany in his court. In the same years, Giorgio Vasari the Younger noted down on the villa plans something in Italian. The main facade of the big building, made up of 2 rows of porticos, gave onto a central courtyard enclosed by a crenellated wall with, at the center, the entrance gate to the villa. Very nice. This place, wow. All of these places, so sweet. La Magia. The via is near Quarata, to the west of Florence, on the northern slope of Mount Albana. That's this one, La Magia. The original nucleus of the building consisted of a stronghold constructed by Vinciguerra Panciatici in 1318, and it was still a fortified construction at the beginning of the 16th century, when the descendants of Panciatici took refuge here to escape the magisterial powers of Pistoia. In 1585, the building was bought by Grand Duke Francesco I, who engaged Bernardo Bontalenti again to turn it into a country residence. The new property bordered on the Poggio a Caiano estate, so the Grand Duke's purchase can be considered as further expansion of the dominion he already had over the Mount Albano area by the extension of the hunting grounds of the Royal Reserve instituted by Cosimo I. The dovecot was heightened to make a kind of guard tower on the right corner of the building. So these people had to protect against something. They took their place over from someone, and who knows? But again, all these people using the same thing. It's kind of like, oh, they all won the contest, and that they're the same people end up doing all of this work that takes years and years and years and years. Something's not up. That's usually the sign of a history that's been hijacked, is when people end up having superhuman abilities. Marignoli, age-old possession of the Sacchetti family. The Marignoli estate belonged to Lorenzo di Piero Ridolfi in 1550, only to be confiscated a few years later by Francesco de' Medici on the charge of his having participated in the conspiracy led by Orazio Pucci. So apparently the Medicis controlled the laws, and they could do whatever they want, and they could bully people out whenever they didn't get control of one of these things. The lunette shows the villa at the time of Don Antonio de' Medici, son Bianco Capello, assigned to him in 1587 by Grand Duke Francesco I, who had it expressly restored and embellished again by Bontalenti. Marignol is amongst the more modest of the Medicean villages because it was intended as a gentleman's home, not as a princely palace. The construction, however, is very important from the architectonic point of view, inasmuch as it constitutes the immediate stage in Bontaletti's development. Yeah, okay. Oh, that's always the way it is. Here we go. La Ambrosiana. This place is ridiculous. The via is at Montalupa, at the confluence of the Pisa stream with the Arno. Carocci traces the name Ambrosiana back to the Ambrosi family, the first owners of the estate, originally consisting of a little lodge and surrounding farmland on which the villa was later built. The actual construction work was due to Grand Duke Ferdinando I. This, in fact, was one of his first building enterprises, as the beginning of the work coincided with his nomination as Third Grand Duke of Tuscany in 1587. Usimbardi, secretary to the Grand Duke, wrote at that time, "In Tuscany he bought and built on the Ambrosiana just for its convenience on his hunting excursions, and many conveniences there were, in fact, in comparison to the original building. They were increased greatly, as you can see." So how were these guys just given the ability to do that? Just for, oh, I want a hunting place. I'm going to take this entire mansion, and it's mine now. Some power. Monte Vetturino. The Monte Vetolina villa, situated on a hilltop of the slopes of Mount Albano, within the territory encompassed by the Royal Hunting Reserve, was built on the initiative of Grand Duke Ferdinando I in 1595 as a resting place for the court during the hunting season. Pretty nice. The estate on which the villa was built already belonged to the Medici family. We know that in 1556, Grand Duke Cosimo I himself stayed at Monte Vetolino. The architect Gerardo Maccini, a new one, carried out the construction of the villa, which incorporated the structures already existing, a rock and a stretch of wall dating back to the period of municipal government. The result was a building with an extremely irregular format. The right side was 3 stories high, incorporating the ancient rock. The left side was situated on a low-lying land, thus having an extra floor, and it was built onto a part of the original wall. Very interesting again. All of Italy, just there must be so many amazing places in Italy, in the mountains, and just all over the place. You never really know. And this one looks like it is Colle Salvetti. The property was situated near the Tyrrhenian Sea on a hilltop of the last western ramification of the lower Pisan Hills. It overlooked a great plain that extended down to the sea. Spini includes Colle Salvetti among the oldest properties of the Medici family. Seemingly it already belonged to them at the time of Cosimo the Elder. Rapetti informs us that around about 1571, the abbot in commendam of the community of Colle Salvetti granted Donna Eleonora of Toledo, wife of Cosimo I, the indefinite emphyteusis of the estate, abbey property. This form of donation was probably in addition to other Medici property on the hill. A few years afterwards, during the time of Grand Duke Ferdinand I, the estate must have held great importance among the Medicean land property holdings, enough for it to be considered worthy of being portrayed in Utins' series of lunettes, which is what we're witnessing here. Again, wow, paid by the Medicis. Any Medicis out there want artwork drawn? I'll draw something for you, please. Either way, moving on, there's a couple more. This one's Careggi. The Via of Careggi has been, rightly enough, defined as the third suburban home of the Medicis, as well as their favorite, considering that it joined the mainly rustic characteristics of the Via cum Farm to the extreme vicinity of the city, with all the advantages of both practical and political natures that such a circumstance allowed. The castle at Careggi was purchased in 1417 by Giovanni di Bicci, progenitor of the Medici family. It was one of the favorite residents of Cosimo the Elder, who had the Michelozzi building restructured and enlarged. The antique stronghold was transformed into a villa without destroying the original castle outline, maintained in the crenellated gallery that crowns the main body of the building. So wow, amazing. And again, these are just a couple other ones that he did that are kind of a little less of the caliber of the other Medicis. This is Poggio Imperiale, situated on the hill just outside the Roman Gate, the ancient San Piero Gaetolini Gate. The Via of Poggio Imperiale kept its original denomination of Poggio Baroncelli after the family were owners up until the 15th century, right up till halfway through the 17th century. The property became a Medici possession in 1565 following the confiscation of the Salviati family assets, among which this villa. Cosimo I donated it to his daughter Isabella, who lived there with her husband. Pretty nice. So this is just a glimpse, again, and it is going to require a lot more research into the Medicis, into how they got their money, how they got their power, how were they able to seize upon all these of the best medieval properties around, how did they do all of this, and they had the artists just kind of doing it. They had hunting grounds. Oh, I want this property, give me a hunting ground. That one looks like the ziggurat of Ur in Iraq, that kind of base structure, and it makes you wonder how many of those other houses may have bases like that, and what is that base? It looks like like it's an Egyptian, like something you'd find in Egypt, leading up the way with all the stairs and different things. Like, wow, what is under these? How old were these built? Are there any underground zones in these? What's in those? Are there any treasures? How much? If anyone out there has any knowledge of the Medicis, let me know. I will most likely be diving a little bit deeper because, again, this artwork leads to more questions, like a lot of things do. And although I didn't dive so deep now, I didn't want to create an extremely comprehensive and long thing. Just really wanted to show the art, tell a little bit about the mansions, add some thoughts and theories, and see what you all thought. Because I know someone out there in Italy must have some knowledge about these Medicis that they could add in the comments. So if you do, please do. And until I dive deeper, I'm just going to continue theorizing that, you know, these people acquired such amazing powers somehow. And look, you can see the originals in this stash in this room. These are what those original semicircle drawings looked like. And it's really fun to draw in a semicircle. I like drawing in a circle better, the mandala, but the semicircles make really great little property kind of things. You know, they show the world. They almost show that glimpse, that property, as if it is its own little piece of the world. And these mansions really were. They were such spectacular gardens, landscapes, architects, every single thing about them. And these people acquired them like it was nothing. Like they were just like, I want that, give me that. And were they inhabited by other people from a post-reset at one point before they got taken away? You know, were they overgrown and then they had to be cleaned out by a series of people who then claimed to be the architects of it all? Who knows? A lot of mysteries here, as always, but I hope we find out some more truth. Lend some information in the comments if you all have any, and bless you all. Hope you all enjoyed this. Have a great one.